Hello there. Welcome to Hard Copy, coming to you from our studios in Abuja. I'm Maukwe Ogun Yusuf. For a brief moment last week, it seemed Nigerians were about to see the repeat of an unpleasant movie in which they always star as the tragic heroes. Few queues, which have been away for a while, reared their ugly heads in filling stations across the country. But the situation was quickly tamed by the intervention of the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, Finance and the NNPC, who assured everyone that there was no imminent price increase on petroleum products, which had caused the hoarding and resultant scarcity. This week, Hard Copy speaks to the Minister of State for Petroleum, Kachikwu, on the difficult issues surrounding Nigeria's oil and gas sector. Kachikwu, Minister of State for Petroleum, welcome to Hard Copy.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's good to have you on the program. Well, we're just going through your profile and going through your responsibilities as Minister of State for Petroleum. It does say here that your responsibility encompasses working in synergy with the President to evolve innovative strategies and formulation of policies aimed at sanitizing the petroleum sector of the country and return it to a profit-generating sector that would positively impact the economy of Nigeria. That's where I'd like to start from.
Okay.
I mean, because we do know that indeed we make money from, we're still a mono economy largely, even though the country is trying to diversify. And we make quite a bit from that product of crude oil. And one of the things you did say when you were minister for 1.5 years was that you had been able to turn around the NNPC, even though you're not there anymore, and turn it to the path of profitability. What exactly is the vision for returning Nigeria to the path of profitability as far as the petroleum industry is concerned?
Okay, first, the ministry itself is regulatory and supervisory. NNPC is commercial. At the time that I took on those responsibilities, like, you know, I held a twin position of both GMD of NNPC and Minister of Petroleum. And part of the mandate that I was given was sanitize, clean up, get it to some business nuance about its operations. I was there for 9-10 months, I think, and we got them profitable in May of 2016.
You are still looking at returning Nigeria to the path of profitability, so to speak. With the NNPCs on the recovery, is that still feasible?
It's going to be very difficult. Let me say that we first faced this same problem when I resumed in 2015. Remember then there was a subsidy. We had actually accumulated over 1-point-something trillion in subsidy, back arrears to be paid, and as an ongoing current business model. One of the first things that I did then was, quite frankly, to seek ways to take away subsidy. So I first, through efficiency and through contract review, reduced the amount that was being spent every month on subsidy from, if I remember very well, reduced it by something close to about 300 million every month. But then that still didn't take it away. And so then we went on to the fuel price increase to take away this whole subsidy element, which usually arises when you have a difference between landing costs and obviously the sale cost. And so we began to have over-recovery effective May or effective June of 2016. And that led us all the way right through, I think, late 2016. By 2017, of course, the price increases happened again. I always say that the problem with my ministerial work is that on one hand, you're fighting hard to keep the price of oil in the international market as high as it can be. But on the other hand, you have to deal with the issue of the effect on the local consumption and local pricing. So as soon as the prices went off, the NNPC went into under recovery. Now, can you make it profitable? Keep them profitable while they're doing under recovery? It's going to be a very tall order. There's a 14 naira margin, as it were, differential in terms of under recovery for each liter of product that we sell.
Where are we with the repair and fixing of our refineries, and what are they currently producing today?
I think that if there's one area where I feel sad, it's certainly the refineries, because obviously there's a huge gulf between my expectations and the pronouncements that I'd made in terms of where I'd like to be and what we've been able to achieve. The reality is that today we're still below probably 15% of utilization of those refineries, because they need to be maintained, they need to be worked, they almost need to be shut down, completely refurbished, because over the last turnaround maintenance was close to about 8-9 years, maybe 10 years ago. And the previous turnaround maintenances had a big question marks in terms of there were a lot more contract opportunities than actual fiscal maintenance. And the issue is not the age of the refineries. We have refineries that are older than those that are working very well, but it requires a systematic maintenance over a period of time. That hasn't been done. So suddenly we are left in a situation where a neglect of over maybe a decade is forcing us to say, at least scraps now, or if you're going to do it, how much does it take? Our sort of guesstimate of what it was going to take to get those refineries working is in the excess of 2.5 billion. I mean, all of them collective. We have 4 refineries, 2 in Port Harcourt, 1 in Warri, and one in Kaduna. That's not money that is easily available. And so in 2016, working with His Excellency the President, I got him to approve for us to use a private sector support model to repair the refinery. And what that meant was that the private sector would bring in money, would not buy the refineries because there was too much emotiveness about selling the refineries on it.
So the 2019 plan is off, isn't it?
Absolutely. There's absolutely no way in 2019, given the fact that up till now no contractual terms have been reached by NNPC and the potential investors that you're going to have refineries all ready to get to 90% capacity template in 2019 and for us to exit complete importation of petroleum products. So I think all you can achieve between now and 2019 is hopefully find a financing model for yours, hopefully continue to do what we're doing, which is encourage and work with Dangote to move full blast on his own and quicken the pace of delivery, begin to continue to work on the modular refineries to try and support in a very minimal way. Modular refineries don't give you the volumes, it's 5, 10, 15,000 barrels production, so that's really not where the answer is.
You don't speak with as much optimism as you spoke with when you first of all came into office. It looks like you have looked at a number of options, you've exhausted this ones, you've exhausted this ones, like what is the plan? First and foremost, we have a situation whereby we don't look, I mean, the Minister of Finance has said we're not taking away subsidies. We have to find a way to, to cushion the effect for the ordinary Nigerian before we can take it away. We have a situation where the IMF is saying this subsidies you have as a country is not sustainable, and yet our refineries are not working, and it seems that we're too emotional to sell them. You have a number of issues confronting you as a minister, and yet we have a sector that is underperforming, so to speak. Really, what exactly is the plan going forward? Would you say that we're totally out of options?
No. One of the things I think I'm gifted with God to do is to keep creating options. So I keep creating more and more options. But if he hit a roadblock, I move to another option. But the reality is that some of these decisions are collective decisions. You want to take away subsidy, you've got to deal with the unions. You've got to deal with Nigerians, because everybody says, oh, take away subsidy and we'll have a solution. When I did it in 2016, I think I must have lost between 10 and 15 pounds. I think, however, one of the things I know that we must do, whether we like it or not, and I hear you say I'm not speaking with that sort of gait that I had. No, it's not that. First of all, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Depends on when I made the first speech. It might have been in the morning. but the reality is this sector, this country is almost totally dependent on this, substantially at least dependent on this sector. So everything that you do affects whether or not you can pay our next bills in the states or at the federal level. And so there's a lot of pressure involved in this in terms of making sure you're taking the decisions that are good for the country, but at the same time do not create a social upheaval, as it were. And so that's one of the jackets that I hang on me each time. But running out of options, no. Giving up, no. Are there solutions to this? Yes, there are solutions. Those solutions are very straightforward in terms of refinery today. I think that first you've got to go find private sector money, because public sector money doesn't exist. You can either do that by saying, I'm going to back it up with some of my crude capacity as a guarantee to raise the money and do it. My preference would be to go to the private sector and find that money and work out, even if it is some level of participation on an equity basis for them, so they can feel enough incentive to take the risk.
Interestingly, I mean, I'm looking at our consumption of premium motor spirits. One of the reasons why the federal government decided that it was going to take away subsidies initially, or one of the arguments is that with the price, what we were paying on subsidies was not sustainable. And we saw that one of the arguments is that, they were also inflating what we're consuming. We didn't even know what we were consuming as a country. I do know that initially when the price of petroleum went to about 145 naira, we did see that what we were consuming as a country did fall.
Yes.
Now it has spiked somewhat. I mean, only a couple of days ago, Triple PRA confirmed that we're now consuming, or was it that they were supplying 56 million liters a day? You have to ask, do we have an increase in corresponding number of vehicles, or is this the NNPC doing, because it is the sole importer, is magic happening within the import area of the NNPC? What is your take on it? Have you looked at it? Are you raising questions?
Yes, I've raised those questions. The President has raised those questions. He's probably more concerned than I am about these booming numbers, as it were. And you're right, when we first did it, we moved from what was then more like a figure of about 52 million barrels, 52 million liters a day. And we came down all the way down to about 35. It was quite substantial and very helpful. But those numbers have spiked. Now, can I challenge those numbers? Yes, I'm questioning them. And I'm questioning them through science. We've just gotten DPR to install trackers that are able to track every product coming to the country for the first time. So maybe in a matter of 1 or 2 months, we'll be able to say for certainty really what do we consume. So
in the meantime, you maintain that there is no reason why the queues have returned. There is no reason why we're seeing the queues that we're seeing right now.
Yes, for now, definitely not.
Not even the talk that perhaps there might be an attempt to, increase the price of petrol.
No. Certainly not from government. There isn't any discussion that I've been part of that has taken place, as far as I know, where the issue of going up in price has been discussed. So certainly not from President Buhari's government. Now, obviously, the conversations in Washington, which was a replay of genuine concerns of the amount of money being spent on subsidizing a product consumption pattern. Whenever that happens, you find a sudden spike in sense of people saying, "Oh, is that a first signal or salvo into that market uncertainty?" And you will have some people who will sort of hold back releasing their product, hoping that maybe something would happen. But I don't know how long you're going to hold a product looking at uncertainty salvo. So not from us, no basis for it. I do know that about 2 weeks ago, the NNPC generally keeps a volume, with PPRA keeps a volume of reserve of about 25 to 30 days consumption at any given time. That's usually our threshold for CAM. And when I was advised that it had come down to about 18 days, I immediately raised the alarm and said, why is this going down this drastically? What's going on? And I was assured that there were enough vessels coming in. It was just a minor logistical and timing issue. But they've since come in and they're back to about 25 days in terms of reserves.
Meanwhile, locally, you seem to have some issue with lawyer Mr. Femi Falana, who has written to you, to your office, over some 60 billion naira production and sharing contracts. He said he raised that issue with you in 2017. You had spoken about losses incurred by the federal government as a result of the sharing contract, and it would seem that it came back again to the fore with the Ramfak acting DG bringing it up again and talking about the reason why Nigeria incurred some losses, 60 billion. Is it $60 billion? Yes, $60 billion revenue loss. Do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, sure. There was no such thing. I didn't have any conversation with my good friend Femi Falana on a 60 billion loss. There's a difference between there's a difference between an opportunity loss and a loss. When I talked in 2017, I did say that the fact that governments over the last, and this is not new, this is a law that has been there that puts in a rule that says after prices are above $20 a barrel, the government has a right under the PSC to come back in and participate in the extra over and above $20 marginal gains, as opposed to just letting the oil companies, hold sway with whatever the differences are. And nobody had done anything about it. It's just gone on for years and decades. And we just stayed, prices moved off. At the time this was entered into, prices were averaging $8 so nobody ever assumed it would ever go past $20. Now when it happened, bureaucracy just never let anything happen. So I think oil companies made money out of it. And so I was talking at the time about the opportunity lost to have addressed that. It wasn't money earned that was lost, that is one. Two, the provisions required a regulatory change. You needed to go to the assembly to change the law to enable you to enforce that $20 cap lift. it hadn't been done. And so there was never a time that I was saying that 60 billion had been law. I was saying, had you changed that law, can you imagine what you could have made? And in any case, the wildest calculation of what you could have made is not in excess of between 15 and 20 billion. It's not 60. We have a sharing formula. So if you use the existing PSCs as a basis, where 70% is held by multinationals on the average, and where 30%, you definitely can't get 60 billion a factor.
Talking about laws in the National Assembly, we do recall that last year, the National Assembly did pass the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill. They had split the PIB, the Petroleum Industry Bill, to 4 parts, and they had passed one. But the President refused dissent on the grounds that it whittled down his powers. What is the way forward? What is the executive arm of government proposing? Well,
what we've said is that you need to address that. The sort of loose powers that were given to the minister, there was not going to be any supervision in the sector. I'm not one for regulatory supervision for the sake of it. I'm one for a laissez-faire approach in terms of let the system run itself. I like what communication, for example, has done with NCCs, for example. But at the same time, they've got to report to somebody. The sort of powers that they left the minister with was that the regulatory agency, quite frankly, will end up approving licenses, allocations, and it was just going to create a turmoil. The minister wouldn't be able to even look after his own terrain. And so the president, not just because he's minister, because he's not going to be minister forever, said, look, if you leave the minister with no powers at all, how is he going to actually do his work? So he asked for that to be changed. There were also a couple of other areas where we had a bit of concern in terms of structures. He sent back to them. He didn't say shoot down the bill. He said, I have concerns around these areas. Some of those concerns were advices that we also gave him. So it wasn't just his own idea. That's gone back to the Assembly. We have tried to work with the Assembly to find some level of accommodation. I think most of the areas have actually almost been cleared, and I'm sure the Assembly, if they have the time post-election now, before the new 9th Assembly comes into place.
You're still thinking that you can round off the PIGB before the 8th Assembly is over?
I hope. I have no control over that. That's an Assembly-driven issue. So let me not give you one of those my deadlines that fail. You were
recently re-elected as president of the APPO, that's the African Petroleum Producing Organization, now for a 3rd time. What does that mean? In an era where OPEC is still talking about quotas, and it would seem that some African countries are still holding the short end of the stick. What does that mean? Well,
what it does for us is that we're beginning to focus on Africa for the sake of Africa. Now, what has happened to the global oil market? A lot of the big ticket purchasers have exited. United States, for example, is a net exporter right now. Asia, which provides a lot of our market, India, Japan, and the rest of them, China, quite frankly, are pursuing very rapidly clean energy sources, electric energy, solar energy, nuclear energy. That is only a matter of time. You find that you really are left with no market in real terms. The only market that is still there, still in its putative very early stage, is the African market. It's 400 million consumers. We're doing nothing with it. A lot of our contracts are with Asia, with everywhere. And one of the things that I try to get Africans to focus on is how do you develop your market? How do you do cross-border investment in infrastructure? Pipelines across countries, refineries where they're most efficient and can be run, and then be able to supply everybody crude from where you have a base like ours in Angola, as the case may be, that can ship out to the rest of the countries that don't have.
It is interesting that you are bringing up, thinking about the future for oil in Africa. And one would have thought that Nigeria would be an example of how it ought to be done. You have listed right now the challenges facing us in terms of even setting up our refineries, getting them to work again, getting a new refinery on the ground, even creating Nigeria, turning us into a market for our own oil products is a problem. Are you really optimistic about the African continent?
Very optimistic, both of the Nigerian market and of the African market.
What drives your optimism?
Because they're doable things. I'll give you an example. If you take the market for Nigeria, for example, today we're producing, I would say we're refining probably on average 12% of our production, average 100, 120, maybe 200,000 barrels locally, probably less. You get Dangote refinery, you get the 600,000 barrels. You add the modular refineries, an average of under 200,000 barrels. You're able to refill your own 4 refineries, 450,000 barrels. You get Egypt refinery working, it's 100,000 barrels. You get Niger refinery, which we've begun to work on with Niger, and 100,000 barrels refinery. You plug yourself away from 120, 130,000 barrels type capacity for refining to about 1.2, 1.3 million barrels. Now, what does it do for you? First of all, it sucks in your local production sufficiently to deal with the OPEC trap.
You've given a list of these refineries which you have to get working. What is the target date for that? I mean, when is a question? For instance, when do we fix our refineries? When is that going to happen?
Well,
Egypt, you've just said, is having a challenge. You know, they're still studying. It's how many years since you signed that contract with them? They're still studying. When is that going to happen?
No, Egypt is a 5-year project. It's way off. I mean, there's nothing wrong. You can't rush refineries. There's no two ways about it. I was with General Gowon during the Octane conference in Lagos, and he was making the point that, look, we built 3 refineries. I had hope by now we'll build 2 more. The reality is that if you build 3 refineries when the financial fiscal terms were attractive, first we've got to make those fiscal terms attractive. First we've got to deal with the Nigerian public that says, all right, you know what, at the end of the day, these subsidies are beautiful, but they're pauperizing us. If we can deal with this subsidy and open up the frontier so that people can find the investment environment attractive, you would not even need to build a refinery. Somebody would build it. Why is don't got to build in a refinery, despite the fiscal tight terms? Because it looks to export. So we've got to open up that market, because if we don't, if we continue to have these restrictions on OPEC, and that's the way to stabilize our $70 price, our $72 price today, and it continues, it means that even if we had developed the capacity to produce 3 million barrels, I can't do it.
We're producing 2.2 million barrels per day, aren't we? But, you know, this bill, the All Producing Communities Bill, which is supposed to be part of the PIB now, is, you know, sitting in the cooler somewhere in the National Assembly. Do you think that there is a plan for the Niger Delta, or are we going to still keep up this engagement whenever there is trouble? You find either the president, the vice president, or yourself going there to go and quell matters. What exactly is the plan? The long-lasting plan for the Niger Delta?
The community bill is critical. We need to. Yeah, you're right. We can't. It's not a touch and go thing each time. We've got to do something that's a lot more elaborate and a lot more permanent. However, one of the things that we've done, whilst we have no control over how quickly the laws can be passed, has been to create a model. And one of the things we've done is we sat down for the first time and we said, you know, we always say we're not investing enough in oil-producing areas. What are the total amounts of investments that are required or that are happening? So we took NDDC's contribution, we took oil companies' contribution, we took state governments' budgets, we took federal government budgets and all that stuff, and we threw all of them in. And whoa, we found that, look, actually a lot of money is going in here, but they had no relationship in terms of their spending patterns. Everybody was doing their own thing. So the oil companies will come in and say, we want to do a school. The state government does the same school. Federal government does the same school. NDDC does its own school. Now, it's 5 schools in the community what they really need? Potentially not. And so for the first time, we're able to put a dossier that captures all these potential funds that were available. And we sat down with the communities, and after the vice president visited with me, I sat down with the communities to say, look, I'd like to see an MOU developed that is centric to your own community. Active, there are 2 or 3 oil companies. And there's, of course, the state government. There's, of course, the federal government, federal investment interventions. And you sit down with the community and say, what will these communities like best? In the past, what will happen is that oil companies will say, well, we're putting an economic empowerment models. You know, we're putting in $20 million to make sure women do petty trading. And nobody supervises that process. So we're now able to sit down with them and say, okay, you have this pool of funds. You have that pool of funds coming from oil companies. You have some coming from state government intervention. You have derivation money, some of which are going in here. What are the things that are so critical for you? Is it schools? Is it roads? Is it economic empowerment? But more important, participate in that process. And so the oil company sits with everybody, then crafts an MOU on how to go about it. Just the sheer fact of engagement and being able to take part in it, because there's never enough pool of funds to do everything, has helped quieten people, because now they can see those opportunities. So for me, every day I've got to produce oil. I've got to find a way of making those environments safe and tolerable for purposes of operation and keep the restiveness down. But that is not the final plan. The final plan is going to come from laws, obviously, and that's the work in progress.
Okay. Well, we'll see how that eventually goes, what your engagement will be like with the 9th Assembly. Well, we have to thank you for coming on Hard Copy.
Thank you very much.
That's our program tonight. If you missed an edition, channelstv.com has it in store for you. And just send us a feedback using the handles on your screen. Thank you for watching. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf. Good night.